After years of unimaginable terrorism, banditry and jihadist brutality across northern Nigeria and the humanitarian crisis unleashed as a result, now add the ravages of climate change that's bringing desertification, floods, droughts, and its own form of insecurity to Nigeria, deepening poverty across the land. Well, today, we spare a thought for the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, the branch of government charged with helping not just the North, but the entire country recover from these overlapping man-made as well as natural disasters, and to pick up the pieces of millions of shattered lives. The minister in charge is Sadiya Umar Farouq. She not only has to worry about all of the above, she's also got to try and meet the federal government's poverty targets of lifting 100 million people out of destitution by 2030. As the Americans say, she's got her work cut out for her. I'll be joined by the Nigerian Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Sadiya Umar Farouq. I'm Charles Aniagolu, and this is the Arise interview. Now, today we examine the phenomenon of disasters in Nigeria: floods, droughts, desertification, insurgency, banditry, general insecurity, and the humanitarian crisis that they've unleashed. And the ministry charged with alleviating the suffering that comes with these disasters and saving human lives, as well as promoting human welfare, social reforms, and lifting millions out of poverty, is the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, which is headed by the Minister, Sadiya Umar Farouq. She's been appealing for additional foreign assistance to manage a complex of disaster risks across the country. The US recently described the humanitarian crisis in Nigeria's insurgency-ravaged northeast alone as one of the most challenging and complex in the world, with more than 350,000 killed since 2009 and about 3 million displaced. Imagine the impact of all this on socio-economic development in that region of the country alone, not to mention all the other disasters that are afflicting the rest of the country. Now, imagine having to be in charge of restoring a measure of normal life to all these millions of uprooted people and giving them assistance and some form of hope.
The National Policy on Internal Displacements provides a platform for all relevant actors in the humanitarian and development space to key in and contribute towards a common goal. And the overall goal of the policy is to strengthen the institutional mechanism and frameworks for the realization of the rights, dignity, and well-being of vulnerable populations through mitigation of impact and achievement of durable solutions to internal displacement in Nigeria.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the Nigerian Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development that you just saw in that video, Sadiya Umar Farouq. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
So we see a lot of distressing images from the northeast, the northwest, of people displaced by conflict, left adrift from their previous lives. But just paint a picture for us of how things are in this regard today in Nigeria.
Thank you very much for having me this evening. Let me start by giving a brief background on the ministry. As you have mentioned in your opening remarks, the ministry was created in 2019 by His Excellency Mr. President to provide effective coordination of humanitarian and international support to ensure strategic disaster mitigation, preparedness and response, and also to formulate programs geared towards social protection and inclusions in the country.
So having this mandate, we are to collaborate, cooperate, and partner with relevant bodies, both nationally and internationally, government at both levels, to make sure that this mandate is achieved by providing the necessary platform to address humanitarian issues in this country. Prior to the creation of the ministry, we had different agencies of government that are tackled with the responsibility of mitigating one form of a humanitarian crisis or the other. We have the National Emergency Management Agency, the National Commission for Refugees, Migrants and IDPs, and also the Northeast Development Commission. These are all agencies that were in place before the creation of the ministry, now under the supervision of the ministry. And then the recently established agencies as well, the National Commission for Persons Living with Disabilities, as well as the National Senior Citizen Center. So these are all agencies that will give wider coverage to different sectors of the society.
Yeah, but with all due respect, my question is, what is the picture in Nigeria today? What's the humanitarian picture across the country?
Well, I will say the picture is not too bad, because we have government's efforts in place, as I've mentioned. That's why I enumerated the different agencies of government that are giving interventions and support to address the humanitarian crisis in the Northeast.
When you say not too bad, what do you mean?
Well, not too bad. We were doing our best. Government has put in efforts by creating these bodies.
But doing your best doesn't mean that the situation is not bad. It just means you're doing your best, but your best isn't good enough.
It's not as bad as it's been,
3 million people displaced in just one region of Nigeria?
Well,
2 regions?
No, not 3 million people. The data we have at our disposal is about 1.8 million internally displaced persons.
That's in the north.
Northeastern
right, that's in the north alone. But that's bad enough, isn't it?
It is, but as I said, we have problems. And then there is the political will to address these issues. By mere creation of this ministry is a demonstration of this government to how we can address this humanitarian crisis in this country. And as I've mentioned, we have agencies of government that have been addressing these issues in the country, especially in the northeastern part of the country where the problem is enormous. And let me also tell you that yes, there are problems, but they are surmountable. The displacement we are talking about, especially in the Northeast, government is providing succor and support to these internally displaced persons, the official IDPs that are in the camps. We provide them with food relief on a monthly basis through the National Emergency Management Agency. Other agencies like the Refugees Commission provides empowerment and skills acquisition programs to this displaced population so that they can be economically self-reliant by way of durable solutions. So government is doing its best, and I think we're going very far.
Right.
In the Northeast, for instance, we have started the process of resettlement of these displaced communities with the support of the state government. Just recently, we returned thousands of households back to their various communities where these communities are safe to return.
Right, but of course that's just the fallout from the insurgency in the Northeast, isn't it? I mean, in addition to all that, you've got natural disasters from flooding and so on, which you also have to cope with, don't you?
Yes.
Tell us a bit about
that. Also, we give immediate response when we have these disasters through the National Emergency Management Agency. For instance, the flood disasters that occur on yearly basis. We have even the National Food Security Council that's been chaired by His Excellency Mr. President, and just recently we have flagged off the distribution of these flood reliefs to these victims of the flood by way of supporting them with farm inputs and implements, and also other support. So here we're also intervening, and where we have fire disasters, we go in as first responders to support, to cushion the effect, and then after which now we come back and look at the permanent solutions that we'll give to these victims.
And of course, with climate change has come more sort of unseasonal amounts of rainfall, desertification, droughts, rivers swollen, landslides, that sort of thing. I mean, in many parts of the world, not just Nigeria. How much is that affecting Nigeria? Is that something getting worse from your assessment?
Well, the picture is not too good, and I will say that we have different government agencies here again that are saddled with that responsibility. For instance, my ministry, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Water Resources, Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. These are all MDAs that are saddled with the responsibility of intervening where we have these issues of desertification, flooding, and so on and so forth. And we have an interministerial committee that works towards these interventions.
Yeah, but obviously, as we mentioned at the outset, the work that's being done may be commendable, but it clearly isn't enough because a lot of people are being displaced, aren't they? And is there any more that the Nigerian government is doing under your ministry, for example, to mitigate these issues, or is it pretty much down to appealing to the rest of the world to come and help? Because, I mean, you made an appeal just a few days ago.
The government has committed enormous amount of resources to mitigate these humanitarian
Well, that's
crisis.
not enough, is it?
Well, nothing is, the resources cannot be enough, but government is doing its best. As I said, it has committed enormous amount of resources to mitigate this crisis using different MDAs. And so we can ask for support, but that does not mean that government is not doing up to its own responsibilities.
Right, and you mentioned earlier, just expand on that a little bit. We've got about a minute or a couple of minutes before we take a break, that these hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of people who are displaced, do you just stick them in internally displaced camps and that's pretty much it? Or is there a program to try and give them new lives, new jobs, that sort of thing?
Well, when displacement happens, it is inevitable that people will have to be in camps or within the host communities, after which government will come in to assess the situation and look at possible areas of intervention and support. First and foremost is to give the immediate relief to these victims to cushion the effect. And then secondly is to explore areas of durable solutions. Durable solutions by way of supporting them in empowerment programs, skills acquisitions, before we now start working towards returning these people back to their various communities. In the case of insurgency, you cannot return people back until these areas are safe for return.
But please stay with us, Minister. We're going to come back in a minute, but we do have to take a break. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat with the Nigerian Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Sadiya Umar Farouq. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Now, Nigeria is faced with an unprecedented wave of different but overlapping humanitarian crises, from attacks and kidnappings to extremist insurgencies and the effects of climate change. Almost every corner of the country has been hit by one form of disaster or another. The scale of these adversities and calamitous events and the impact they have threatens the very fabric of Nigerian society. With every attack, whether man-made or natural, human lives are lost, uprooted or permanently damaged. Poverty deepens dramatically, unemployment rises significantly, faith in government and governance diminishes, and of course the country is perceived to be more unstable. Take clashes between herders and farmers, for example. Disagreements over the use of land and water, as well as grazing routes, have been exacerbated by climate change and the spread of the Sahara Desert. As herders move further south looking for pasture, thousands have been killed in clashes over limited resources and tens of thousands displaced. And it is the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development that's left to alleviate the humanitarian suffering and to improve the welfare of the victims. And the Nigerian Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Sadiya Umar Farouq, is still with me in the studio. Thank you for staying with us.
Thank you, Charles.
And what sort of budgets do you have to deal with all this?
Well, the budget is there, and I will say government is trying, but considering the limited resources generally at the disposal of government, we do not have enough. But we are hopeful that with collaboration and partnerships with development partners and other non-governmental organizations, we'll be able to fill up the gap.
Yeah, but what sort of shortfall do you have? For example, do you say, I need $1 billion, $3 billion, and I've only got $100 million?
Well, I cannot say precisely how much we need, but we need more than what we have. But let me also state here that Mr. President has been very gracious to the ministry.
Yeah, but surely you must know how much you need.
Yes,
I mean, how do you make a budget if you don't know?
Let me say that Mr. President has been very gracious to the ministry. Just recently, he has approved the expansion of the social investment program, and that means more budgetary allocation. He has also supported in the special intervention on the flood disasters. That also means more budgetary allocation. So on the government side, government is doing its best. But as I said, given the limited resources, we do not have enough. We still need more, and that's why we are reaching out to people. Well, that will be in millions, so to speak. I do not
millions
want,
of dollars.
I don't want to mention millions of naira.
Well, I mean, this is your opportunity. You're live on air.
No, I don't want to mention billions because that might scare,
yeah, but you still have to be
partners.
Realistic about what you need.
We are realistic. We have developed a plan of action, and we have our budgetary proposals to these partners when the need arises.
You just don't want to disclose that publicly?
Well, I do not have the exact figure, and I do not want to be quoted wrong.
You don't want to be speculating?
Yeah, I don't want.
Okay. Of course, in addition to the natural disasters that are often unpredictable and the fallout from insecurity, which we just talked about, you've also got to deal with the challenge of trying to implement the government's policy of lifting 100 million people out of poverty. How is that going? So far, so good. How many have you lifted out of poverty?
The National Social Investment Program is one of the largest social programs in the sub-Saharan Africa. Government has committed about 400 billion naira on this program. And this program,
which is less than $1 billion, basically.
Yes, but
and you want to use that to lift 100 million people out of poverty.
It's not just the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs that is charged with that responsibility.
Right.
This is an all-government, commitment.
So there are different MDS. Pockets of money in different places.
Of course, there are. Right. There are different programs in different MDAs.
So how does your department, with the 1 billion that you've got, roughly $1 billion, how does your department lift people out of poverty?
We lift people out of poverty through the various programs that we have. on the National Social Investment Program. We have 4 clusters on that program. We have the Empower program, which is the job creation program, and this program is geared towards our unemployed youths who have graduated and they have no jobs. The government is supporting them by way of putting them on primary places of assignments where they can go and teach our schools, and they'll be paid stipends of 30,000 naira per month. Those in the health sector are also posted in the health institutions, and then those also that choose to be farmers or in the agri sector, they are also supported to be in those institutions by way of paying their monthly stipends. So this is a step towards alleviating poverty. And then the other program is the Conditional Cash Transfer Program. And this program is meant for the poor and vulnerable households, where government is also giving them stipends of 5,000 naira monthly. This is also another step towards alleviating poverty. We also have the Government Enterprise and Empowerment Program. This is also a program targeted at small traders, market women, and small-scale farmers. The government is supporting them with interest-free and collateral-free loans to support their businesses. This is another step towards alleviating
Okay, that last bit rather answers the question.
Charles, let me stress here. In the Empower program, we are also supporting youth in different skills. We call it the N skills, in different skills of their choice. We train them in more phone repairs, in carpentry, welding, hospitality business, and so on and so forth. And so these are really programs that if people are very serious, they will key into, and it will go a long way in alleviating poverty in this country.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned those last bits, because when you said alleviating poverty, it sounded as though you were simply giving them little bits of money which they used to go and buy food, and then it creates a dependency syndrome. Whereas what you want to do is to obviously make them independent so that they can look after themselves.
No, it's beyond just buying food, Charles. When people talk about giving out handouts to people, you know, that is an elitist statement, because I've been in the field. I know what 1,000 naira will do.
There's still a handout
to these people, but if judiciously used, this 5,000 naira that we are given monthly, we have households that have formed themselves into cooperatives, and they are saving out of that 5,000 naira, and they're using that savings to some kind of to have some kind of businesses. So it's not handouts.
So it's making a significant difference.
It's making a big difference. And when you support the youth in skills acquisition, that is not handouts.
Absolutely.
It's left to the individual whether to make judicious use of that support or not. But the government is doing its best, and I have seen it on the faces of these beneficiaries. They don't see this support as handouts. It goes a long way in uplifting them out of poverty. It goes a long way in making a difference in their living standard.
Right. Can you put a figure to the number of people who you might say have been lifted out of poverty by your own criteria?
Well, by my, I will speak on my ministry. I know that we have supported over 8 million individuals.
That's a significant number.
That is since inception of these programs. And then on the homegrown school feeding program, we are supporting about 9.8 million children, primary school children, primary 1 to 3, where government is feeding them with 1 meal per day. In that program, a value chain is created where you support the women that cook the food, and then the farmers around that community that you buy the food stuff from. So it's a whole value chain that's been created,
that's
and
a
people
very
are
good
being
point.
yes, and people are being transitioned on their way out of poverty, and we have seen it, and we have the testimonies.
That's impressive, by some measure. Now, the bits in your job title of humanitarian affairs and disaster management are fairly clear and obvious. What does social development entail?
Social development, I've just spoken about those programs under the social development aspect of the ministry. Is basically social support, social welfare to the people, and also helping people to develop skills so that they can be independent, they can be economically independent. So that is the social development aspect of the ministry, where we're working towards Mr. President's aspirations of lifting 100 million Nigerians out of poverty in the next 10 years. That is by the year 2030. That is the vision.
Does that seem like a realistic goal?
I think it is, given the fact that there are different NDAs working towards this. I've just mentioned what we've been able to achieve as a ministry. About 7.8 million people are being supported. Apart from the victims of disasters, those we cannot also, as it comes, that we'll be able to know the number.
And just tell us a little bit about yourself and how come you're the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management, Social Development. I mean, how did you sort of get into that?
Well, first and foremost, I see this job given to me by His Excellency Mr. President as an honor and a privilege, and it has also made me to amplify my efforts in serving this country with every sense of responsibility and commitment. I am Sadiya Umar Farouq. I am from Zamfara State, from a very conservative home where girl-child education at the higher level is not the norm. But I have a mother who was very committed to saying that I go to school and attain that higher education. So I owe this to her because she has instilled in me those values that have made me what I am today.
Well,
till today, she calls me by name Ermakaranta, meaning the diligent student.
I like that. That sounds very interesting. Please stay with us, Minister. We'll want to talk with you a little bit more. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat with the Nigerian Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Sadiya Umar Farouq. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Now, my guest today is the Nigerian Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Sadiya Umar Farouq. Among the many humanitarian challenges she has to deal with is the fallout from climate change across the country. According to the World Meteorological Organization, the number of weather-related disasters to hit the world has increased fivefold over the past 50 years. Scientists say that climate change and more extreme weather are behind the rise in these extreme events. As global temperatures have risen in recent decades, there's been a significant uptick in the number of disasters related to weather and water extremes, and more than 90% of the deaths related to weather disasters have occurred in developing countries, Nigeria amongst them. And of course, with these extreme events come big financial impacts. And the Nigerian Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Sadiya Umar Farouq, is still with me in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for speaking with us and staying with us. And we got a text message from a viewer who wanted me to ask you why you don't use banks' commercial and microcredit to pay beneficiaries, as that would have brought them into the formal net to be easily identified. Also, according to them, it would reduce the incidence of the corruption associated with cash transactions.
Thank you very much. I think by this, the person is talking about the conditional cash transfer, where we make cash payments. When these programs came on board in 2016 and the social safety nets, of course, there were gaps. And basically because of the nature of the beneficiaries that we give this support to and the locations. So it was not possible to start up initio with the banking payment system. But beneficiaries were identified through a very rigorous system, and they're being paid through SIM. But now we have started the process of digitizing these cash payments. In the urban and suburban areas, it's much more easier, where we have the facilities in place, the communication infrastructure, the banking facilities, and so on and so forth. So we are starting with these areas.
So there are people who are
yes, we have just flagged off the pilot in FCT and other states across the geopolitical zones, where we are now paying using the digital system. This will reduce for us a lot of burden. I agree with the person that sent that message. It will also reduce cash extortions from the vulnerable beneficiaries, and it will also promote social inclusion. So the ministry is working on this. We have set up a technical working group that comprises of the ministry staff from the World Bank, the staff from the NCTO office, as well as the NASCO office, and they're coming up with strategies, plans, risks, identifiable risks, and so that we can roll out this program across the country. But as I'm talking to you now, we have started the process. We have flagged off the pilot states, and we hope that before the end of next year, we should have been able to go fully digital on these payments.
Well, that's interesting to know, and that's clearly answers the question to some extent. How many threats do you have to deal with their humanitarian fallouts in Nigeria? I mean, I know of at least 4, including insurgency, clashes between herders and farmers, banditry and kidnapping, climate change. But I wonder if you're also now seeing humanitarian crises emerging out of the separatist agitations in parts of the southeast, southwest, and also fallout still from the oil militants in the Niger Delta.
Well, every crisis gives rise to humanitarian crisis. And once we have these issues, it becomes really very challenging for the ministry. And as we always say in the humanitarian space, there are no humanitarian solutions to humanitarian problems. The only solution is peace.
Yeah, but what I'm wondering is, how do you go about determining, for example, you've got agitation in the southeast, you've got some agitation in the southwest, you've got a traditional agitation in the oil producing areas. I mean, do you sort of say, okay, we've identified a new cluster, And we're now going to channel resources to
these
that.
clusters are there, but it's the responsibility of government to address these issues, and then so that we don't fall into this humanitarian
No, I know,
crisis.
but what I'm asking
as
is,
I said,
have you identified a new cluster in the southeast?
Of course, these are all the clusters that you mentioned.
Right.
The agitations, the militancy, the banditry that is already there, the insurgency, the climate change. These are all indicators.
But which of these humanitarian crises would you say is the most challenging for you? Which requires the most urgent and immediate attention?
Well, they are all very challenging. There's none that's greater than the other. They are all humanitarian issues. And once they occur, we have to move in to see how we can mitigate.
Well, for example, we know that the Northeast has been ongoing for a long time. But what I'm wondering is if there are new things that are breaking out.
The new ones now that we don't hope for to happen is these agitations.
Right.
Because that can be really very catastrophic.
So it hasn't become a challenge for you yet?
Well, we don't hope for it to happen.
Right. What about climate change?
Climate changes has always been there.
Right.
This has been a challenge.
It's
And
been
as I
getting
mentioned earlier,
worse.
yeah, we're doing that in collaboration with other MDAs, as I mentioned.
So when the US, which is on the front page of this day newspaper today, when the US describes the humanitarian crisis in Nigeria's northeast as one of the most challenging and complex in the world, what does that mean? What do they mean by that?
That's a very serious statement. I don't know if that is the most challenging in the world, considering...
Well, it says one of the most challenging,
one
of the
most
most challenging
okay.
and complex.
Yes, it is challenging, but as I said, government is doing its best, and we're on top of this situation, and we hope that very soon we'll be able to overcome all these challenges.
So just reflect for us, we've got about a minute left on the conversation. Reflect for us going forward. The Buhari administration is going to be ending in less than 18 months from now. Reflect for us on where you see the humanitarian situation in this country in that time, by that time.
Well, I can say with every sense of responsibility that by the time this administration leaves, it must have been able to leave a legacy behind, one of which is that it has had the political will to address the situation, the humanitarian situation, especially in the Northeast that we inherited. When we came on board, there were about 17 local government areas in Borno State that were being under the territory of the insurgents. Now no local government is under their
So you're
custody.
hoping to improve on
We are hoping we are improving, and I also want to say by creating this Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, it's also a legacy that this ministry, this administration must have left behind.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but we're out of time. Sadiya Umar Farouq, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much.
That's it. Bye-bye.